Hi, everybody, and welcome to another edition of Trucker Tools Talks. Every week, we're interviewing people from across the trucking industry for business tips, updates on what's happening in the market. Today, we're joined by Vice President of Sales, Recruiting at Randall-Reilly, Mr. Seth Becker. Thanks for speaking with us today, Seth.
Yeah, my pleasure. My pleasure. Really happy to be here.
We're very happy to have you. To start off, could you tell us a little bit about yourself, including how long you've been working in the industry?
Yeah, absolutely. So I've been in the industry about 8 years. And before I got into trucking, I was in higher education, believe it or not. But it was still kind of recruiting. So I had managed enrollment teams for many years at a private for-profit university.
Okay.
And then we did a lot of cutting edge things there. And so a big trucking company approached me and said, hey, we know you use a lot of technology. You've got some really cool processes in place that we've heard. We'd love for you to come work with us and implement some of those things that you've learned in higher education. And so I did it.
I'm curious.
Yeah.
How did that trucking company or that company catch wind of you? Because to me, that's such a separate space, right? Higher education, logistics, it's such a separate space. So how did that connection happen?
Honestly, it was social circles, right? So the individual is a COO of a company. We kind of ran in similar social circles, and he just kind of heard about what I was doing, and I'd been doing it for 10 years, and he just said out of the blue, hey, can I take you to lunch? I said, sure.
Why not?
There's no such thing as a free lunch, but sure, we'll see where this goes. And he told me about what they were doing, and it just, we were able to put a plan together that made sense for both of us, and I jumped ship, and it was a great experience.
I think that has been the connection for a lot of people in this industry that I know of, right? Like there's two different paths. Either you have family that's in it, so you kind of get brought up that way,
right?
Or it's just that chance encounter, right? Somebody's like, hey, I like who you are, I like your attitude, you want to give this a try. That was my same experience. So that's awesome. Yeah. So I did that. I was the director of driver recruiting for about 3 years. And we used a company called Randall-Reilly for our marketing and advertising. Okay.
And so I already had a relationship with them. And then Randall-Reilly approached me and said, hey, we love what you're doing there. Why don't you come do it for lots of other fleets? And so I said, let's do it. Yeah. So packed up the fam and moved from Arizona here to Alabama. And now as a former client, it's great to have been on both ends of the kind of the spectrum. It's great.
Arizona to Alabama. That's a big change.
Yeah, a little bit of culture shock. But you know what? Southern hospitality, it's a real thing. We love Saturdays and the football season, and it's been great.
We have some Roll Tide fans on our company, so
good.
Sometimes
easy to cheer for.
Yeah, sometimes it gets a little contentious.
Yeah. I understand that. Yep.
So what are some of the most common challenges carriers are having right now when it comes to recruiting drivers?
Yeah, great question. So we're in a really interesting market right now where, at least for fleets, rates are up, right? Rates are really, really strong, and then volume is strong.
Right.
So as a natural result, you've got all these fleets across the country saying, hey, if volumes are high, if rates are high, how do we add capacity, right? How do we take advantage of this great market?
Right.
Yeah. And so what's happening is you've got more and more of these fleets competing for the same pool of drivers. And that creates all kinds of interesting problems for fleets. So one of them is remaining competitive with pay. So we've one of our brands is called Truckers News, and we often do different polls. We do a driver advisory board to understand, the market and what they're seeing. And one thing that we found is fleets across the country have raised pay at least twice already this year, and have plans to continue to raise pay. So that's, when you see one fleet doing it and you're like, shoot, to be competitive, we've got to do the same thing. And so it's created this thing where everybody's trying to outdo the other person, and it's really challenging. Go ahead.
That seems like that's a trend, right, in the market. So are there any other trends in recruiting that you're seeing?
Yeah. So with everybody competing for that same pool, naturally costs have gone up for that cost per lead, that cost per hire, which are metrics we look at all the time, and with our clients help them, watch those trends. It quite literally costs twice as much this year to hire a driver as like 2019. So twice the cost to acquire a new driver, really in 2020 and 2019. So you see people raising their marketing budgets to say, okay, if a driver costs more, we need them, we got to have them. We're willing to increase our marketing budget to try to keep up with the times.
Right, to attract those drivers. So that's one way they're being creative. What are some other creative, unique tactics carriers might consider?
Yeah, everybody. I hear a lot of chatter about TikTok, right? Everybody's like, hey, that's where the younger drivers are. We got to be on TikTok. And I do think it's important to work with influencers, especially if you've got folks at your fleet already doing it. Like, hey, provide them with some coaching, provide them with the tools and resources they need to really promote your company and the things they love about it. We haven't seen a whole lot of return on advertising dollars yet in TikTok, but it's definitely a space I think people are trying, and I think that will eventually see a return as more and more people jump on it. But some other really creative things, people are looking outside of the US for drivers, right? They're going, hey, if there's not enough here, how do we bring in folks from other countries willing to drive a truck into the country? We've seen fleets start their own schools, their own CDL schools, to say, hey, if we can't get them somewhere else, let's create our own school. Let's provide the training and bring younger drivers up into the industry that way. So those are just a few of the kind of creative things we're seeing people do now. I mean, a lot of it though is just doubling down on budget and doubling down on what channels have traditionally brought hires into the industry. Facebook, Google, job boards, aggregators, those types of things.
So you talked about that marketing spend to attract people in the first place.
Yeah.
But in order to attract drivers, attract employees, you got to know what's really important to them. So what is really important to drivers today in finding a company to work for? What's driving them to work somewhere?
Yeah, really good question. So when we've actually, once again, going back to studies we've done, the number one criteria, the number one thing a driver looks for initially is pay, right? It makes sense. I think we're all human. We want to be compensated well for what we do.
We all like to be able to pay our bills at the end of the day.
It's a big thing. But it actually goes beyond that. And I could narrow it down to three big things, I think, which is predictability, reliability, and personalization. So it's not just pay, it's predictable pay. So you can make me big promises, but if next week rolls around and I didn't make what you told me I was going to make.
You're telling me I'm going to make so much per mile, but the miles aren't coming.
Right.
Okay. Yeah.
Yep, spot on. So predictability. So it's predictable pay that they really care about. So can you offer guaranteed pay, right? Is something a lot of drivers are looking into. Reliability. Home time, right? Once again, very difficult with some family situations or personal situations to be out on the road 2, 3, 4 weeks at a time. So when I do need to be home, can I rely on you to get me home when I say I need to be home? So reliability creates a lot of trust, with the fleet and with the driver.
That rings a chord for me because, I'm someone who's been in the industry for a long time myself. I've got over 15 years in the industry myself. And drivers are expected to be in their trucks all the time. At least that's the way it seems to me, is they're always out on the road. They're always in their trucks.
That's right.
And really within the last 2 years, you talked about going back to 2019, within the last 2 years, we've seen such a change in the work-home life balance, right? So why shouldn't drivers reap the same kind of benefits? Why shouldn't they have a better work-home life balance? That makes a lot of sense to me as well. I'm glad you said that. That really does make a lot of sense.
Yeah, and then just kind of that third and last piece that I mentioned, which is personalization, is we say it all the time. You know, we see it. We see people advertise it, but hey, we don't treat you like a number.
Right.
You know, we treat you like family. Well, there's a lot of dysfunctional families then, right? If that's the case. So I think it's standing behind that, right? And really supporting what you say. And it starts from the very beginning of the recruiting process of that personalization, where even your drip marketing emails, are they so bland? Are they so generic that it from the beginning makes the driver feel like I'm just a number, like they actually don't care about me as a person? So the more you can do to personalize it from the very beginning, the better luck you'll have with attracting good drivers.
That makes a lot of sense. So when it comes to smaller carriers, because you know, you're talking about marketing spend and all that stuff, that tends to be big budget companies, right? That you're talking about. So when it comes to the smaller carriers who might not have a dedicated recruiting budget, do you have any suggestions for how they can reach new drivers?
Yeah, I can throw a few things out there. One thing we like to say around here a lot is reputation is currency. So, and I think that's pretty powerful, where once again, going back to the numbers and the studies, it actually shows that the number one method that drivers still use to research a company, talk to another driver.
Word of mouth.
Word of mouth. Word of mouth still plays a huge role. So even if you're a smaller fleet that doesn't have a big budget, what are you doing about your culture, right? What are you doing to create a situation where those drivers talk to other drivers and say, you got to come here. This is a great place to be. The other thing I'd say is someone is telling your story, right? So is it your drivers? Somebody's telling your story. So how do you get out in front of that? How do you control the narrative?
What is your story? Somebody's telling it, so what's your
Somebody's
story?
telling it. That's right. And there's a lot of, you don't have to have a big budget to be on social media, right? I mean, you can actively promote yourself on social media. You can do videos. Gosh, we all have these little devices now that are pretty powerful, and you can shoot videos. You can encourage your drivers to shoot videos that tell the real story of what it's like to work with you. And then the other thing I'll say on that is, if you don't have a budget, maybe consider getting one, because even though it costs way more to acquire a driver this year than any other year we've seen before, the rate of return on that driver is actually, when we've done the math, 2 days faster on average to recoup those costs. So it feels like, hey, we don't have the budget, but if you can spend the budget to get those drivers, you'll recoup those costs 2 days faster this year than even last year.
Wow.
So something to think about.
So, you know, we're talking about recruiting drivers.
Yeah.
Side of that coin is drivers leaving companies, right? Because they got to, you know, you did talk about earlier, you know, looking outside, thinking outside the box and recruiting them. But the flip side of that is, how can you retrain the driver? How can you retain the drivers that you have, right?
Yep.
Are there any suggestions you would share?
Yeah. So based off of polls that we've taken this year, surveys we've taken this year, so the number one reason a driver chooses a fleet to work for is pay. We've talked about that, with actually reputation being a close second now, which is really interesting. But the number one reason why they leave a fleet is not pay, is actually how they're treated. So I think that's interesting, because when you think about what's doing the treating, right? Is it the processes? Is it the equipment? And I think that's the wrong question, right? It's not what's doing the treating, it's who's doing the treating.
Is it potentially a driver manager?
Yes. Yeah, no, that's spot on. So when you think about culture, culture comes down to people. So it starts with hire the right people. And then this number 2, I'm so passionate about, train them. Train the people and then trust them to do the right thing. So if you hire right, you train them, and then you trust them, you're already building a culture where people want to be a part of that. Right. And it sounds so basic, and it's, oh yeah, you got to have a good culture. But what's interesting is it's the low-hanging fruits, the easy things that we often see people not doing, right? We go back to treating people like a number and dysfunctional families. So culture, expectations, and communication are the big 3 in my book. So we talked about culture. Expectations happens on the front end with your advertising, your recruiters, right? Are they describing the position the right way? Are they being realistic and honest about what a driver can expect?
Transparency, right?
Transparency all day. You got it. And then communication being that last piece is, what channels are you using? How are you keeping in communication with a very mobile workforce, right? Is your executive team, are they very transparent and open and sharing what's going on with the company? Are they open to feedback? And are they doing something with that feedback? So more and more we see consistent surveys going out to drivers. It's not about the information you're getting, it's about what you do with it.
Being actionable on those answers back, learning.
Yeah, spot on.
Yeah. I think we talked. You already mentioned this. I was gonna ask you. What are some of the biggest reasons drivers are leaving companies or leave the industry altogether? But we didn't really talk about why they're leaving industry. Why are people getting out of the industry altogether? It's not just leaving the company, but there's also this part of it where people are just, I'm done.
Right. Yeah.
And, what do you think we can do is to change that as an industry as well?
So, a lot of similar answers to the previous one, but I think one of the moves I see some fleets making, and it's the right move, is as you look at your freight lanes, would it make sense to, instead of have one driver move it from A to Z, is there somewhere in between they can just go ahead and switch, right? To create more dedicated lanes where drivers don't have to go as far, right? That they are staying closer to home, that home time improves to where maybe they're home on the weekends or at least weekly, if not daily. So we see a lot of that going on, shorter routes. I think that's really important. Compensation, we talked about that. Everybody wants to be paid fairly. And when you have record-setting years like this one, where fleets are really making good money, share it, right? What kind of profit sharing plan? Yes, exactly. Another big one is wait times, where if the drivers aren't moving in a lot of situations, they're not making money. So there's things.
we had a saying, if the wheels aren't turning, you're not earning. So
yes, that's exactly right. And so when you think about why aren't the wheels turning, is it because shippers are just being apathetic about the situation? Is it because they're shorthanded, right? Is it because the trucks are breaking down, right? Are we maintaining them well? Do we have good equipment that keeps the trucks moving and performing well? So reduce wait times, pay them fairly, and improve those relationships within the company, and create better home time, I think, are some of the solutions.
So let's look to the future a little bit then. Do you have any predictions for the future of recruiting, and how will things change in the next year or 5 years?
Yeah, it's kind of the golden question, I think, is where's this all headed? How do we stay out in front of it? And the best way to look at it, I think, is efficiency and effectiveness. where you can gain huge efficiencies with technology. And that's, I mean, it's disrupting every industry out there. So trucking's no different. You and I were chatting briefly beforehand about how in some situations, this industry is super quick to jump on the latest and greatest technology. And in other instances, very slow to adapt, right? And bring on those new innovations that could really improve the quality of life for drivers, but the company as a whole. So on the efficiency piece, technology, right? What's out there? What industries can we look at that are already doing it to learn from? We don't have to reinvent the wheel, but they're already doing it. So what can we do when we look at an Uber or a Lyft? Their process is very different. The way they pay drivers is very different. Is there something we can learn about what they're doing and apply it to more of an over-the-road type position?
Yeah, adopt the good,
Yeah.
Take advantage of something that's working well.
Yep. Absolutely. And then the piece that, once again, I'm going to be really passionate about is I think everybody, for the most part, sees that in the future, right? Technology, it's where we're headed. How do we use it? What technology should we be investing in? Right. The second piece of that, the effectiveness piece, is more of the human touch piece, because the more we lean on technology, the more important it becomes to not lose that thing that actually makes us human, right? Which is caring about people.
The relationship.
The relationships, 100%. So that comes down to training, which I mentioned before, is invest in your people, right? Hire right. And if you do those things, drivers will naturally want to come work with you, and they'll want to stick around because they actually feel like they're part of something that matters, that they're part of a company that they understand how they fit in, and that we're all working together to push towards the greater good. So I don't think there's any big secrets, to tell you the truth, of what is going to happen in the future. But those who learn to balance the efficiency with the effectiveness, or the technology plus the human touch, are going to be the ones that win all day. Yeah. I mean, we do hear a lot about, the self-driving trucks. And I try to keep up on that. But I tell you what, I still don't see it happening for another 5 to 10 years, just with the infrastructure. There's so much to figure out still there that, I don't know, it's not a big concern, I think.
I'm with you. I still see a driver or a pilot, whatever you want to call it, being part of the equation still. It's just, being aware of the change in the industry and being a lookout to make a good change and adopt good practices. Like you mentioned, let's look at what's working well in other industries, and hey, let's see if it'll work well for ours as well. Yeah,
absolutely. And, I know obviously people are going to want to tune in and watch things because they want to find that silver bullet, right? That idea they can grab onto and say, that's it. That's the thing we've got to do. But I think if we're all honest with ourselves, we'll realize there's really no silver bullets. There's just a bunch of lead ones, right?
It's the same as all the companies in this industry, right? Not every single, I don't think there's been a single place that I've worked for that operates the exact same. You know what I mean? And they've all been successful to varying degrees, but none of them have operated the exact same. So.
Yeah, exactly. One other thing I'll throw out there, just because I've been taking a long, hard look at it, is simplicity, where we've looked at how many times a driver gets contacted when they inquire about a job, and it would blow your minds. Just one example is I filled out a short form pretending to be a driver on some popular job boards. Uh-huh. And in one instance, one job board, I had gotten 130 attempts to contact in the first 3 days.
Wow.
So how confusing must that be for a driver, right? where multiple fleets reaching out, 130 attempts to contact. How do you keep the information straight? How do you know who you can actually trust, who you should go work with?
That word of mouth, like you mentioned, that's why they rely on word of mouth so much. Yep. Because if somebody else is going to vouch and tell you what their experience is like working for that company,
yes,
it allows you to refine where you're going quicker. Yeah.
Yep. So that simplicity, if you can figure out a way to make the decision easier, that's where a driver is going to go, right? We even talked about pay, where from one week to the next, a lot of drivers don't understand what they're going to make or how they're going to make it. So if you can simplify how they're getting paid and make it predictable, you're going to win.
I just want to say again, thanks, Seth, for joining us today and sharing your knowledge. It was great talking to you. And thanks to our audience for tuning in for another edition of Trucker Tools Talks. If you have someone in mind that you'd like us to interview or have any questions, use the comments box and let us know. Thanks, everybody.
Thanks.